Hello, everybody. This is Amber Hines. I am one of the board members at WP Accessibility Day and one of the lead organizers for this year's conference, which is going to be on October 15th and 16th. So if you have not registered, go to 2025.wpaccessibility.day and register to attend now. I am super excited to be here today with James Kemp, who is one of our platinum sponsors with his company at WooCommerce. James, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role at WooCommerce?
Yeah, sure. I am James Kemp, like you said, and I'm the core product manager at WooCommerce. So I deal with all things product relating to our core open source plugin. So that would be, things like features that go into the plugin, merchant and builder user flows that happen within the core plugin, and most recently a lot of accessibility work as well. Hence, having this session today and also wanting to sponsor the WP Accessibility Day on the whole.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here, and we very much appreciate you all being a sponsor. I know we had a sponsor, unfortunately, someone who said they could, dropped out, and you guys were like, oh, we'll help, which we very much appreciate because it makes a big difference for the event and making it possible for everyone around the world to attend. So can you tell us a little bit more about, you were saying there's been this big focus at accessibility at WooCommerce. What led to that focus on accessibility?
You led to that focus on accessibility.
I know. I'm like leading questions here. It's almost unfair, isn't it?
It was all you. No, we. So I guess it was about a year ago, right, that you, I believe, were setting up a store for yourself or for one of your companies.
Well, I could add on that. I also run the WordPress accessibility meetup.
Yes.
And people were always asking about WooCommerce, and I was like, I'm going to build a store, like a real store that functions for that meetup. It's still there. And every once in a while, someone buys something on it and make like 50 cents. I get really excited. But yeah, it was literally, I wanted to see how accessible can I make WooCommerce?
Yeah, so you were doing that, and I think you tweeted, or you posted a page where you listed like a lot of accessibility issues that you found whilst building that. I think there was 50 odd issues that you found. And that kind of spurred on, like, we need to have a look at accessibility within the core plugin. We need to focus on this because it means that merchant sites, whenever a merchant launches a site in its state back then, it wouldn't have been accessible out of the box, and that just isn't ideal. So yeah, that kind of spurred it on. I dove in a little bit to see how we could dig into those specific features or specific issues that you'd mentioned, and see how we could get some people working on them. But then I think it was WordCamp Europe, and I forget the year. I guess it was
2024.
2024.
Last year, right?
Torino. Yeah, we met, and I met a few other people from the accessibility space as well, Bet Hannon, and some others as well. That we just had a few half-hour sessions with people there, and it was flagged that we really need to start figuring this out because the European Accessibility Act was coming into place and is now in place. And we just needed to make sure that the merchants were ready to abide by those new laws. So yeah, we spent a lot of time. We hired Equalize Digital, which is obviously very familiar to you, to audit the WooCommerce core plugin. Primarily the front end output of the WooCommerce core plugin, and just find issues across like every area of that front end output, and subsequently also did the same for a lot of our premium, what we call canonical extensions as well. So yeah, I think recently we pushed an update. We kind of did this over a period of time, but most recently we kind of pushed the final update that made the front end of WooCommerce fully accessible, and updated like the reporting standards and things on the WooCommerce website, and are actively working on the premium extensions as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the morals maybe for people here is it is definitely worth it to report issues that you find in plugins or with WooCommerce in general, because they will listen. And it's not like a black hole. Like I opened all those GitHub issues and I was like, will anything happen? But it did. And you guys fixed them all, which I think is really cool. Because sometimes I think as a site owner, I'm like, if I say this, will it go anywhere? So I appreciate that you all actually took those issues seriously.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's probably going to be issues that people submit that kind of fall through the cracks. So it's worth kind of not submitting an issue and just leaving it at that, but follow up and find the people to ask, or just keep bringing it to the top of the page on GitHub. As you can imagine, we get a lot of discussions and issues created on a daily basis, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Are facing these issues that are maybe something that only they experience, or maybe it's something more global, and each one requires someone to dig into it and figure out what the impact is. So yeah, I would advise to not just submit it once and forget about it, but keep on top of it.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned the European Accessibility Act, which came into enforcement in June of 2025, so this year, and that was a partial motivator. For people who are listening and maybe aren't familiar, that is a law in Europe that requires e-commerce and other types of websites, but for WooCommerce purposes, e-commerce websites that have more than 2 million euros in turnover or 10 employees to be accessible. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some internal conversations, if any there have been, about just why accessibility is important for e-commerce and how it impacts your merchants and their customers?
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, I think the Accessibility Act itself was, I guess, the final push that we needed to implement all of these things in one go. I think we've always focused on accessibility, particularly in the new stuff that we've put out in recent years. But there's a lot of legacy stuff that was, hanging about from just the code in the past. But I think, yeah, accessibility, alongside, abiding by these new laws and helping our merchants meet the criteria that is enforced upon them, is also just having a more accessible store in general. Essentially gives you, more potential customers. As a merchant, more people can buy your products more easily, and I think that's very important. But on top of that, typically a more accessible site is easier to use, whether that's down to like legibility of the site itself, or people using keyboard navigation. And I think a lot of people who don't necessarily have the needs or the requirements to actually do that still use the keyboard navigation to navigate sites.
Especially on like a checkout page or a form, right?
Yeah. I think I always do. Like, you don't tend to click between the different fields, right? You just tab into them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's improving the kind of base offering of e-commerce for everyone, merchants and customers. So it's definitely been important. It's always considered when our designers are putting designs together, you know, in terms of like color contrasts and things like that. And it's now, well, I assume there was some, you know, automated checks that happen already, but we've kind of more extensively adapted them based on this recent audit as well. So everything going forwards will be, you know, compliant with what we've done in this past year with the audit that you've done.
When you say automated checks, are you using any sort of linters that include accessibility testing on pull requests, or are you saying more like in the browser? What are you using?
Yeah, I'm talking more linting.
Okay.
When it comes down to like the technicalities of it, I'm not sure. I'm not the right person to ask, but we use a mixture of linting and end-to-end tests that, you know, take place. I'm not sure what the kind of browser level tests are, or the automated version of those browser level tests are.
Mm-hmm.
But I expect there are some.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting as WordPress moves towards more JavaScript and less PHP. I think it makes it easier actually to do some of those automated tests for accessibility.
Yeah, for sure. Not to get too technical, but I was playing about with Puppeteer, which basically like spins up a browser and takes screenshots of what it expects to see and what it does see, which is really great. And I think
Yeah,
Data
it can
Inspector
do
is a similar
neat.
thing, right?
It can do neat things too, where you tell it, okay, go to this page, add this product to the cart,
Mhm.
now open the mini cart, like, so it's not collapsed, and screenshot that. Like, it can do follow instructions and steps, which I think
Yes,
is
yeah,
really neat for
exactly. Yeah,
testing.
it's really clever.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you mentioned, the front end of WooCommerce is fully WCAG 2.2 AA conformant. And in our testing, we determined you also passed several AAA criteria as well. Would you want to highlight some of the more impactful enhancements that were made?
Yeah, I
Am I
think
putting you on the spot?
yeah, I mean, there was tons, right? You're aware of how many we put through, but I think we touched on it really with, you know, the form improvements and with it being e-commerce, you know, form input fields and select fields and field labels and all that kind of stuff is highly important. And we did tons of improvements there. We also did a bunch of color contrast fixes, you know, just to make the defaults much more acceptable. And obviously, some of those things can be overridden. And I think that the nature of, you know, WordPress and WooCommerce in general is that we've set this like baseline standard, but it could all be overridden by whatever theme they're using or whatever customizations they do. But to have the baseline there is essential. But on top of that, we did a lot of keyboard navigation stuff, screen reader enhancements with, you know, ARIA labels, and just generally being, you know, more consistent throughout the front end with how things are presented. And yeah, there's a lot of things that we did.
Yeah.
There is a blog post, I believe, on the developer blog, which
Yeah, I think
outlines
I
some
have
of those
it.
things.
I should see if I have it linked in here, but maybe I don't. Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I can throw this link in our chat here for folks on YouTube. So we have it, I think.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. I'm not sure if they link to it, but you can also filter the GitHub issues by, you know, ones that have been closed that have the accessibility tag.
Yeah, so you can go to github.com/WooCommerce/WooCommerce.
Yes.
I think. and then go to issues, and there's an accessibility tag, and you can look at everything that's been closed or that is currently open, which is a really great way to be able to see like what's being worked on, what's already been fixed, what might be coming. And of course, if you did come across an accessibility issue, is that the best place for someone to report it?
Yeah, exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just, you know, with as much detail as possible. I think we have special templates for submitting issues. So yeah, as long as we have a good amount of detail, we should be able to figure out what's causing it and how to fix it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what were some of the biggest challenges that you all encountered with making it more accessible?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges are technical, right? The great thing about WooCommerce and WordPress is how extensible it is, but it's also one of the biggest issues. You know, so the things that we updated, we had to make sure that third-party plugins and even our own like plugins that add on to WooCommerce aren't negatively affected in some way. Like we're not, you know, reformatting how something is meant to be presented from that plugin's point of view. So that's probably the most time-consuming thing is figuring out how, you know, what we're changing impacts those things. Mm-hmm. But it also gives us the opportunity to kind of be more opinionated in how these things should be presented, so that we're not, and we could refer to like the notices that appear when you have an incorrect field at checkout, for example. Being more opinionated there is probably a good thing, and you know, having the default be accessible and consistent is the ideal state. So yeah, it helps with, you know, aligning our kind of design guidelines, design framework, also developer guidelines and things like that. So yeah, it's a challenge, but ultimately once you solve it, it's better for everyone using e-commerce, which is a good thing. And then the other thing is just like how complex e-commerce is. And I think there were a number of issues where the issue itself was only able to be reproduced under like a specific set of circumstances. So I imagine even for you, like finding some of those issues was quite complex because, you know, everything's not just there by default. It requires some level of toggling or like turning options on or off.
Yeah, I could speak to that for just a second.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't realize if you're gonna testing a website, like a built website, is actually, I think, much easier because you just go test it as it loads. And maybe there's a few different scenarios on like a filters page where you could have different results, and so you have to make sure you test for different types of filtering or something. But testing a plugin,
you have a nice sitemap as well, right?
Yes, you have a very nice sitemap. So I think we're up to right now, we have 4 different testing sites that we're using for Woo, because we also realized we have like a Woo Classic that's running storefront, and then we have the 2025 version of Woo, right? Because we've got blocks and not blocks. And then you have to have every block that existed, we would have to put in like sometimes 3, 4, 5 of them with different settings filled in or not. And then there was one where it's like, okay, we're going to test it with the setting, like the admin setting for add to cart redirect turned on. And then we had to go turn that off. And then we also had to test adding products to cart without that setting, right? Like, so it's all the different settings and stuff. It is definitely more complex, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. And then, yeah, I expect there's some like bizarre scenarios that may have been missed or that required a follow up and, you know, additional issues adding. But yeah, I think the hope is that we've covered like 99% of these things.
Mm-hmm. I know that you all have some blogs and some resources on your website. And of course, everyone can go to, is it just woocommerce.com/accessibility?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that page we added after this kind of process as hopefully like a sort of a hub of links to all the different places where we talk about accessibility, and also the reports that have been generated as a result of this accessibility project.
Do you have any practical steps that you would recommend for either merchants or for developers who build WooCommerce websites that want to make their sites more accessible? Or is it just go there? Is that the recommendation? Do you have anything else you would advise?
It's a good starting point for sure. I think as well as the store being accessible, you need to consider the rest of the site being accessible. So one of the first things to think about is the theme that you're using. You want to make sure that the theme itself is accessible, because like I touched on before, the theme can change a lot of things. I think themes are changing a lot these days anyway. They're becoming more of a framework for customizing the display of blocks, which I think is a nice direction to go in. So they should be inherently more accessible anyway, but you might find things like font sizes and color contrasts become an issue. And I think to plug you again, you have your accessibility plugin, right, which should pick up on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, our plugin, there's a free version on WordPress.org that people can use if they want to scan for some problems. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that's a great starting point as well. I'm not sure how many themes are currently like stating their accessibility level.
So that's a good question. I don't actually know, but if you go on WordPress.org, for people who aren't familiar, there's a filter in the theme directory there if you're looking for a free theme that you can search by accessibility ready. Those have all been reviewed by a human, not necessarily with the exact version of the theme, but at some point in time before it got the accessibility ready tag, it was reviewed. So that's a good place to start. I think there's a couple hundred, maybe less than 200 actually. But I think you're right. With block-based themes, it may be a little bit easier to control a lot of things yourself. If you need to fix things, then it might be if you're using a classic theme where stuff would require developer level knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think classic themes more typically would override, entire templates and change everything, whereas blocks is a bit more structured in its output, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, those things I would recommend. I would recommend when you're adding images and things to products to use alt tags, or alt text even. Use proper heading structures in your product descriptions. But for the most part, anything WooCommerce is putting out should be accessible. So it's more the stuff that you're adding as a user or as a merchant that you need to be a bit more conscious of and thoughtful about what you're adding. And I don't know what the best kind of front end testing tools are, but I expect there's some that will be able to, alongside your plugin, will be able to like read out the page using VoiceOver, for example. Which should help you understand.
VoiceOver, which is a screen reader, if anyone has a Mac, it's on their computer. So they just need to go to settings, accessibility, and turn it on. And if you have Windows, you can use NVDA, which is free and open source. And I agree with you. I think that's a good place, even if it seems a little scary to turn those on at first, but doing it and just trying to listen to the page is a good way to review things.
Yeah, I know I've turned it on by accident many times.
How quickly did you turn it off?
Yeah, why do I turn it off? But no, I think that's a great way to do it because it helps you kind of visualize the structure that someone who, may be visibly impaired would be seeing your page, and maybe they see like the footers showing up first or something, which doesn't make any sense. And is also highly unlikely, but as an example.
Yeah, not as common in WordPress, but I have definitely seen that in some of those like drag and drop builders that exist out there, because for some reason they set a tab order based on the order you put the component on the page, not the order it literally exists. Like if this was the first thing you built, it's tab order one. I don't even know. It's so weird. It makes you see stuff like that and you're all like, oh, WordPress is so wonderful.
Yeah. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those are my key tips for sure.
So we are getting kind of closer to wrapping up. I'm curious, can you tease a little bit about what's on the horizon for accessibility in WooCommerce? I don't know how much of what we're currently working on you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think, and I think I kind of gave away right at the beginning. We're also doing the premium canonical extensions that are kind of marketed as WooCommerce owning. Auditing all of them, we've audited a lot of them already, right? And I think many of them are now accessible, and we're just awaiting the reports to be published for them. But alongside that, just to continue, staying on top of the accessibility of the core plugin, and also any new blocks that we build, and just kind of continue to try and bake in a bit more automated testing at the point of submitting PRs, and code level automated testing, so that we don't see regressions appearing in the code. Yeah, I think those are the key things. Was there something else that you had in mind?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I know one thing that we had talked about too was after we finished with all of the front end, circling back and working on the admin to make sure that
for sure.
people with disabilities or who use assistive technology can also build websites with all of the WooCommerce extensions and plugins. So
yeah, I would love to do that. I think the back end is a lot more complicated because it's tied to WordPress, right? It's mostly WordPress output, which I believe is fairly accessible anyway. Am I right in saying that?
I would say yes. So I did just open a handful of issues in Track over the weekend for things that came up. I'll say any developers who are interested in accessibility, joining the WordPress core accessibility team is a great way to help and to learn. And I know that Joe Dolson right now might be the only person who's maintaining like the classic editor views, which would appear in a lot of plugins. It's not default for posts and pages, but even like WooCommerce editing products is like a classic editor view. And there are a lot of plugins like that. So having an extra person there to help him out would be really beneficial. If anyone watching is interested in learning and contributing, that's a good place to go. But there is a lot of work that has been put into the main shell, I guess, itself, and also Gutenberg.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can imagine the block editor being fairly tricky to make accessible. I'm not sure what that looks like currently.
Yeah, there are several hundred issues open for the block editor. I know they get worked on all the time. It is definitely a little bit more difficult. Also, it's not PHP, so it's a different type of development knowledge that you need to have in order to work on Gutenberg, I imagine.
Yeah. So. The other thing, which I'm not sure is going to happen or not, but I would like to see, is on the WooCommerce marketplace. Maybe it already exists. I haven't checked recently. Similar to the WordPress repository, is to just mark plugins that have kind of been deemed accessibility ready. I think
That
that
would be
would
really cool.
be very useful for people choosing plugins.
Yeah, for sure. So let's chat a little bit about WordPress Accessibility Day, which I've said it before, but I'm going to say it like 5 times during this. Is coming up very soon, October 15th through 16th. Our schedule is out now. Have you had a chance to look at the schedule?
I have indeed.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by how many there are. You said one
So
an hour, right?
yeah. So the cool thing about this conference is it runs a full 24 hours. So it'll start at what's 10 a.m. my time and then run through 10 a.m. my time the next day. But what that means is no matter where you are in the world, there's going to be conference sessions you can tune in for during your business hours. And for us
Amazing.
on the organizing team, that is really important because we didn't just want to do something that's in the Americas time zones, for example. We really wanted to have a global event that made accessibility more accessible to everyone. And so that is why we do that. It does mean that you could like sit there in your pajamas with popcorn at 11 p.m. and watch a session if you want. But did any of those sessions stand out to you or anything that you think you might be tuning in for?
Yeah, there's a few that I felt related to the work that we've done. And I also have a follow-up question for you.
Okay.
I want to know, do you stay awake for the whole thing?
So the last 2 or 3 years, I think I've gotten about 3 hours of sleep in the middle. Like I've
Right.
taken a short little nap. Last year, I went to bed at about 2:45, and then I was back online at 6:30.
Wow,
So
that's
for most of
dedication.
it is a very long day.
Yeah.
It's hard that we have a phenomenal team of organizers, and it has definitely gotten easier because the first year that we restarted it, Joe and he and I were the only ones who ran the feed, I think, like the whole time.
Wow.
So that was really hard. But the last couple of years, the organizing team has grown, and we have some really great organizers in Australia, which is
Nice.
super helpful for us because it allows us to relax. So last night I was up because it's hard when it's like happening and it's the thing you work so hard on to like
Yeah.
go away from it. But I wasn't like doing anything except for sitting on Slack, watching, talking as needed with the people who were running it. But I wasn't like doing the hard work of making sure the thing stayed live. So it has
Nice.
gotten easier. And every year I'm like, maybe I'll sleep like an hour longer.
Yeah.
So
But you won't. You'll wake up all of a sudden and run to your computer.
yeah.
So yeah, I'll call out 2 specifically, which I think are kind of highly relevant to the work that we've done. Advancing accessibility through community and open source, I thought, is a relevant one. You know, WooCommerce itself is open source, so I think there's a lot of crossover there. And auditing WordPress plugin accessibility, a practical journey from code to compliance, which also is very relevant.
Yeah. So both of those, if anyone else wants to read about those or see when they're going to happen, you can get that if you go to 2025.wpaccessibility.day/schedule. So it has been very fun having you on, James. Thank you for being our brave first sponsor to do a live stream.
No problem.
How can people follow up with you? And of course, what other websites do you want to call out if there's any other pages on the WooCommerce site that you want to point out for people?
Yeah, so to connect with me directly, and I believe my DMs are just open anyway, so if you want to drop any issues on my plate, I am James C. Kemp on most things, but primarily X or Twitter. I'm over there most of the time. I occasionally publish content on my personal blog about kind of, behind the scenes stuff that we're working on. I've done a few posts on the accessibility stuff over there. and you can find that at jamesckemp.com. And then, yeah, just the WooCommerce developer blog, the WooCommerce main blog, and the GitHub. There's also a discussions area on GitHub where some of these conversations tend to happen.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And everyone who is watching, if you have not registered yet, please go to 2025.wpaccessibility.day and get registered for the conference October 15th through 16th. It is totally free. You can make a donation and get an amazing shirt, which this year our shirt has American Sign Language letters for WPAD on the front.
Nice.
And on the back, which you cannot see, but it has alt text that describes the t-shirt.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's kind of like the reverse of the image is our thought here.
That's
so
awesome.
It's like a nice, cool, accessibility friendly and nerdy t-shirt, which you can get if you make a donation, or you can just register to attend for free. Thanks so much, James. And I'll see everyone.